lot yesterday with Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet. She was answering questions from parents on a variety of different behaviors that parents were saying their children were exhibiting in school. And she was talking about a functional behavior assessment and how important it is to know the function of a behavior. So I want to back up just a little bit and fill in some jargon and things that were being discussed, because it was such an important conversation and there were so many different behaviors that were being talked about. So everything that we do in life repeatedly, we do for a reason. We get some sort of a paycheck from it. We call that reinforcement. There's, for people who chain smoke, there is a paycheck in it. That's why they do it. It might, for different people, it's different things, right? For some people, it's because they look so cool, right? For other people, it's taking that deep inhalation that they don't do without a cigarette. For other people, it's the nicotine rush. So lots of different things for different people. And if we just assume, so often what happens when somebody says, I want to stop this behavior, right? But if you assume what the paycheck is, or you don't even bother to deal with what the paycheck is, a lot of times you're not going to be effective at changing the behavior. We know that if you really know what the function of the behavior is, there's a whole bunch of science that will say, oh, if the function of the behavior is this, then this is what works the best, right? Even in the classroom, even with autism in the classroom. So I mentioned the 4 usual suspects yesterday. Let's take just a second to talk about those, because there's really 5, but with younger kids, it's usually about these 4 usual suspects, but we'll talk about the 5th one as well. So the number one reason why kids do things in a classroom is for attention. That's the former teacher here. I'm telling you, it's the number one thing. There are some kids, I always called them the precious empty buckets. These are kids that just for whatever reason, they have a greater need for attention, and they just, it's really hard to get their bucket full. And if you don't get their bucket full, they will act out because they want attention. And you know what? When you need and want attention, it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad attention. At a certain point, you'll take anything, right? And if you doubt that, like I always say, look at tabloids and you will see people engaged in very bad behavior just to get attention. Okay, so that's one of the 4 usual suspects. Another one that's very prevalent in a school setting is escape. You want to get out of doing something. And if you're a kiddo, going back to our communication lesson today, if you're a kiddo who doesn't understand the lesson or what's being asked of you, put that through your own filter. If you're sitting in a classroom where somebody is wildly gesturing and doing this and you don't get it, don't you want to leave? I do. I start looking at other people going, are you getting this? And if they're like, no, I'm not getting it either, then I go, let's leave. Why would I stay for this, right? And you know what's worse than everybody going, oh, no, I don't get it either, is when everybody else goes, yeah, no, I'm getting it. Why aren't you getting it? Oh, then I really want to leave, right? And that's how our kiddos are. So it could be a specific task that they don't like. It could be being with a person they don't like. It could be the time of day they don't like, but they want to escape from it. And look, if I throw a fit and you throw me out of the classroom and send me to the principal's office, woohoo, I won. Right? So very important to know when it's escape driven. Okay, the next one is access to someone or something. So, sometimes I'll see kids that will behave in a certain way. I mentioned it yesterday that there was a kiddo that would run out of the classroom every day. And when he would, the vice principal would come and get him and they would sit in the office and do this with pencils. I think initially he wanted to escape the classroom, but eventually he wanted access to sitting in her office in a cushy chair and bouncing pencils, which if you don't understand what's happening in the classroom sounds a lot better than sitting there and being the person that doesn't get it, right? Okay, so attention, escape, access to something. So the last one is the toughest one to solve. It's the toughest one to figure out that this is what it is, and it's the toughest one to circumvent, and that's sensory. You're doing it just because it feels good. So for the kids who, spit on their desk and draw in the spit, I'm not Not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time it's because it feels good. Sometimes when kids bite and bite their hands in the shirt, it's sensory. Although it could be other things as well, depending on what happens afterward. And then the fifth one, which we don't talk about very much on the show here because it's really mostly for people that are older, is control, having control. And later on, it becomes a big thing that, for people who have anxiety, especially control, sometimes it doesn't matter what it is, but just to have control over something. So, okay, imagine for a second that a kid is engaging in a behavior, and the example that I always like to use is because it's easy, is the kid who's biting. So the child is biting and we go, oh, this is not good, right? Because biting, ooh, somebody's going to get hurt, and people will assume, oh, it's this. Oh, it's sensory. Well, it might be. But what we need to do is look at what happens directly before the biting and what happens after the biting and everything else that's going on. And usually you want a trained person to do this, and it's called a functional behavior assessment, and it's got several different aspects to it. They're like an investigator. They'll interview people and say, what did you see? What did you see? What did you see? Right? Then they'll go and watch to see if they can see the behavior, and then they might try different things to see, does the behavior happen in the absence of this, or does it happen in the absence of that? Right? So there's all these different things that go into an FBA. And you, as a parent, can ask for an FBA to be done on a behavior in school, or a teacher. It's very rare, and I think teachers get really about asking for an FBA to be done because it means somebody else has to come in the classroom, and, administrators don't like that. But a teacher can. They can, and they have, and they do. You can... The thing is, you can ask your ABA team to do an FBA on a behavior, but if it's happening at school, they're going to have access to the school, which depending on your school administrators, they may allow them in, they may not, right? Because they're so afraid that they're going to be found to be the thing that's causing it. Well, I got news for you. It's not about guilt and blame, but things happen in the classroom. You can't have control over everything as a teacher. And one of the reasons why it's important to do an FBA and figure out which one of these 4 usual suspects, potentially 5 usual suspects it is so you can do the best possible intervention. All right, we'll go back to the biting. Might be sensory, but what if the biting is for attention? And what we see is that, the child, something is happening with the class that's being dealt with as a group. The child bites the student sitting next to them, and the teacher goes, why did you bite that person? You shouldn't bite that person. It's not acceptable. You come over here and sit by me. I don't want you sitting by her because you might bite her again. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of attention. And it feels good to the child. So if we see that the behavior starts happening more often as the teacher is doing this, we would change our tactics and make sure that there is no attention given for the bite, but we would change the behavior beforehand, which would be to give the child a ton of attention before they can get to a bite so that there's no need to bite. You see what I'm saying? So function of the behavior. If it's in a classroom, ask for an FBA to be done. The school has the way to do it. Ask for it in writing.